Strength, they said it looked like silence, like composure, like holding it in. So I became good at that. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I said I'm fine with shaking hands. I carried the weight without asking for help. They called it resilience. They said I was admirable, but no one ever asked what it was costing me. This is not a story of someone who finally broke. This is the story of someone who finally softened. Because real strength is not in the holding, it's in the releasing. Not in silence, but in truth. And maybe you're tired too. Maybe you've worn the mask so long, you've forgotten how your own face feels. Let this be your permission. You don't have to be strong in the way they taught you. You just have to be real. It didn't start with trauma, it started with expectations. Be strong, don't cry, handle it, push through. And so I did, again and again. At first it looked like resilience. I was praised for how much I could carry, how little I asked for, how well I managed. But slowly strength became performance, and I forgot how to put it down. I didn't realize that every time I swallowed a feeling, every time I said, I'm okay when I wasn't, every time I made it easier for others, I made it harder for myself to breathe. I began mistaking numbness for power, silence for dignity, exhaustion for virtue. And what I didn't know then was that pretending to be strong is its own kind of suffering. Because there's no applause when the lights go off, no audience when you're alone with your aching. Only you, and the version of you who keeps asking, but when do I get to rest? I wore the smile like armor. It was polished, practiced, and always ready. The smile that said, I'm okay even when I was unraveling inside. People loved that smile. They said I was graceful, resilient, inspiring. But they didn't see the price tag. They didn't see how I clenched my jaw during dinner conversations, or how I locked myself in the bathroom just to exhale. They didn't see how I performed being fine so well, I started to believe it was all I was allowed to be. That's the thing about smiling through pain. It slowly erases you. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A moment of silence when you needed to speak. A nod when you wanted to say no. A sure when your soul whispered, please not again. I became dependable, strong, unshakable. But I also became invisible in my own life. Behind that smile was a grief I never named, a loneliness I never admitted, a child version of me quietly begging, can I stop being strong now? But strength became identity, and identity became expectation, and expectation became the prison I didn't know I was living in. The hardest part wasn't how others expected me to keep smiling. The hardest part was how I expected it of myself. Because if I stopped, if I let my mouth tremble or my tears fall or my voice crack, what would be left of me? That's what I feared, that under the smile was something weak, something shameful, something broken. But the truth? What lived beneath that smile wasn't weakness. It was the most honest part of me, the one brave enough to feel. And the first time I let the smile drop, really drop, and someone stayed anyway, was the moment I realized. Real love doesn't need the performance, it just needs the person. There was a time I believed that showing weakness meant losing love, that if people saw the cracks, they'd leave. I thought vulnerability meant being unguarded, and unguarded meant unsafe. So I built a fortress around my heart, not with walls of stone, but with smiles, sarcasm, perfection, and silence. Every time I wanted to say, I'm scared, I said, it's all good. Every time I needed comfort, I became the comforter. I didn't know how to ask for help without feeling like a burden. I didn't know how to cry without apologizing for it. Somewhere along the way, I started confusing being seen with being judged. So I performed safety, even when I was trembling. I performed confidence, even when I was drowning. I performed control, even when I was falling apart in slow motion. But the deepest loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded while wearing a mask no one realizes you can't breathe beneath. The truth? I longed to fall apart in front of someone who wouldn't run, not to be fixed, not to be analyzed, but to be held, to be heard, to be human. I began testing tiny truths. I don't have the answer. I'm not okay today. That hurt me. And instead of being abandoned, I was embraced. Instead of being judged, I was joined. That's when I realized vulnerability isn't about collapsing in front of everyone. It's about letting the right ones see what's behind your strength. Because real love doesn't flinch when the mask falls, it moves closer. People often said, "You're the strong one." And I nodded, smiled, wore it like a medal. But they never asked what it felt like to always be the strong one when life knocked the wind out of you at 2 a.m. and there was no one left to call. I held others up while silently crumbling. I carried families through storms and then cried in dark corners where no one could hear. Because strong people, we don't fall apart in public, we break in private. We scream into pillows. We wipe away tears before anyone walks in. We learn how to silence our own panic attacks so we don't make things worse for others. And for a long time, I thought that was what made me good, noble, unselfish. But here's what no one tells you. The strong one is often the most neglected, the least checked on, the most emotionally abandoned. Because when you're the person people rely on, they forget you might need someone too. And maybe you've heard this. You're so strong, I don't worry about you. But inside, you wish someone would worry. You wish someone would ask, what would it be like if I didn't have to carry it all alone today? There's a deep grief that builds when you become everyone's emotional shelter, but have nowhere safe to fall yourself. Until one day you stop pretending. You drop the armor, you say, "I need help." And for the first time, you feel strength in the form of surrender. Not collapse, not weakness, but sacred vulnerability. The kind that says, "I matter too." I was always better at giving, better at supporting, better at listening, better at showing up. Receiving, that felt foreign, uncomfortable, like weakness wrapped in kindness. When someone offered help, I'd say, "I'm okay." When someone gave me praise, I'd deflect. When someone tried to be there, I'd make excuses for why they didn't have to. I wore self-sufficiency like armor. I thought it made me strong, but the truth, it made me lonely. Because every time I refused support, I reinforced the lie that I was only worthy when I was useful, that love had to be earned through effort, that need was shameful. But the soul doesn't thrive on giving alone. It needs to be held, to be seen, to be poured into, not just poured out. And so I began to practice, not perfectly, but bravely. I let someone hug me and stayed in it. I let a compliment land and didn't explain it away. I let myself lean, just a little, and the ground didn't disappear beneath me. It took time. It took unlearning the voice that said, "You're a burden." It took forgiving the part of me that believed love was a transaction. But here's what I know now. Receiving isn't weakness. It's trust. It's intimacy. It's belonging. And when you let yourself be held, you begin to heal in ways no strength ever could. For years, I believed I had to choose. To be strong or soft, to lead or feel, to be respected or vulnerable. And every time I reached for softness, that old voice returned, "Don't be dramatic. Don't be too sensitive. Get it together." So I straightened my back, stuffed my tears, focused on performance, control, and survival. But strength without softness is armor, and armor can't be touched. I looked brave, but I was disconnected. I looked reliable, but I was distant. I looked whole, but I was numb. No one warned me that chasing strength alone would cost me intimacy, would cost me presence, would cost me joy. But slowly, gently, I began to unlearn. I let myself cry and didn't apologize for it. I let my voice shake and still spoke. I let someone else take the lead and didn't feel small. And in those moments, I found a kind of strength that didn't need noise, didn't need recognition, didn't need to win. A quiet, grounded strength, one rooted in truth, one that could say, "I am both strong and soft, and I do not need to shrink either one to survive." Because softness isn't the opposite of strength. Softness is where strength goes to be restored. I used to think rest was a reward, something you earned after proving your worth, after producing enough, after being everything to everyone. So I pushed, through exhaustion, through illness, through heartbreak. I made strength a religion and productivity its god. Rest felt like laziness, like quitting, like weakness in disguise. Even when my body screamed, my mind said, just a little more. Don't be selfish. People are counting on you. But the day I gave myself permission to rest, without guilt, without explanation, was the day I finally tasted a different kind of strength. Not the kind that lifts weight, but the kind that puts it down. Not the kind that shows up for everyone, but the kind that shows up for yourself. That day I sat in silence, not as punishment, but as prayer. I let my heart breathe. I let the tension drop from my shoulders. I let the clock tick without chasing it. And in that quiet, I heard something I'd forgotten. You don't have to earn rest. You were always allowed to exhale. Now, I don't wait for collapse to stop. I don't need a crisis to rest. I don't ask permission to pause. Because I've learned strength isn't how long you can go without breaking. It's how tenderly you return to yourself when you finally do. There is a quiet kind of liberation that doesn't come from winning or fixing or proving. It comes from laying down the armor and saying, this is me, without the performance. No more pretending to be unshakable. No more over-explaining strength. No more carrying what was never mine to hold. It took years of silence before I learned that softness wasn't a weakness to be conquered, but a truth to be remembered. I used to think healing would make me shiny, polished, sharp, unbreakable. But healing made me tender, present still. Now I walk into rooms doing less, offering more. Not because I have it all together, but because I'm no longer trying to. I speak slower because I value space. I pause longer because I respect what's unspoken. And when people ask, how did you become so strong? I tell them, I stopped pretending. I let myself be seen. And I started coming home to a self that never needed to be perfect, just honest. If you're tired of the mask, let it fall. If you're tired of the pressure, let it go. You don't need to prove anything to be loved. You don't need to hide your softness to be safe. Come home to the quiet, to the truth, to the version of you that's been waiting beneath the weight of who you thought you had to be. Because that version is more than enough and always has been.